Nice. There we go. I couldn't help myself. I had to make a shit post about President G because that genre of shit post is extremely funny to me. Refill your popcorn. Fill up your popcorn. You'll love what doesn't happen next. Please enjoy the Nothing Ever Happens, featuring President Xi of China. Alright. Launching the game. I got actually a really long list of stuff to talk about today, and there might also be a subject from the Discord that merits some discussion as well. Yeah. Found someone making an argument for ICE saying it's just normal to kidnap children. Nazi shit detected. Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll talk about that. Yeah, conservatives not sending their best, unless they are, in which case, also, like, they're not sending the best people out there. Delete that. Dang it. My inbox is acting finicky. Okay. Okay. Nice. Let's pick character. Maybe, you know what? I'll do a little bit of Mario this time. Really like this Mario skin. I assume the ice stuff is going to get hard to deny as time goes on. Yeah, what's going to happen with the ice stuff, which I will talk about exactly what they've been doing, is people will, like, everybody's going to be fine with it until it's them getting arrested if they support it right now, right? Like, that's one possibility I can see. You know, that conservatives and some liberals, although mostly just conservatives, are like, yeah, fucking deport those illegals, despite the fact that ICE is raiding churches and schools and whatever, because they don't care. The consent has been manufactured already. They just want suffering, right? Or, like, the alternative is that ICE kind of gets stuffed, and their desire for suffering is, like, perpetually blue-balled. It's weird. It's a weird phenomenon where people will claim like, will avoid a problem until it affects them. Yeah, I mean, we've encountered various versions of this before, you know? But to get into some more details about ICE, about what they're doing, I couldn't find a whole lot about this outside of, like, a mainstream news article, so I'll have to tread carefully. But ICE apparently has been given arrest quotas. You guys probably heard about this in some stripe or another, where in order to continue this, like, show of force, ICE has been told to arrest like 1,200 people per day, which is absolutely insane, like completely unhinged, you know? Problem I see for Republicans that ICE is too thirsty. I do anticipate that becoming a problem as well, especially because it already seems like there's a big budding like resistance movement, specifically around denying ICE access to places like churches and schools and homes and whatnot, so that they can't, like, kidnap children, as you were saying. That's, you know, ICE is targeting the most vulnerable groups that they can find, so they can meet those quotas. Because there is there's a kind of a banal dimension to this, where, like, even if, like, ICE doesn't need to be super racist for this behavior to inevitably happen anyway. Like, that's just what naturally happens when you establish a quota, right? It reinforces whatever systemic biases already exist, because they are predisposed to go for the low-hanging fruit. And what's the low-hanging fruit when you have an arrest quota? The most vulnerable groups of society that are unlikely to be able to fight back, i.e., if your immigration services, people that look brown or seem like they are, candidates for not speaking that good of English, even if they are green card holders and citizens. And of course, it would also be, much lower income neighborhoods and stuff that ICE is targeting, not to mention kids who might not have, whose parents might not be around. That's why they're going to the churches and the schools. Sometimes feels like I won the lottery by being autistic sometimes. Yes. Also, everybody is autistic in some form or another, but yes. Person also said mental trauma is normal for children. That is what we in the business call internalized child abuse. They were abused as a child and they perceived it as normal. So now they have justified that to themselves by projecting that onto other kids that are experiencing literally the violence and oppression of the state. They're like, yeah, that's just normal. Because, I don't know, their dad hit them growing up or something like that. But yeah, I kind of spoiled the headline by talking about that. Federal agents in immigration operations told to be camera ready as thousands arrested. Interesting, they do not mention the arrest quota in the title. Let me control F for quota. There we go. ICE leaders determined to increase arrests. Teams across the country have been given various quotas for the number of so-called high-profile immigration sweeps they should conduct each month, with the goal being to beat the number of administrative arrests made by immigration and customs enforcements last year, which was something like 100. It was like they arrested something like 110,000 people last year. So to beat that, they would have to arrest like a lot of people. I guess that's the origin of the sort of 1,200 per day quota, right? No, I got bumped off of at least from the top route. ICE is looking at people saying you look sus. Yeah, that's the metric that they go by, because number one, the quota is impossible to meet anyway, and number two, they don't actually care that much because ICE are inhuman, like extremely fucking racist monsters that are terrible human beings and terrible at being human beings. So they'll just arrest any random like Tom, Dick, or Harry that they see on the street, especially if they look brown or are in a poor neighborhood. So they'd be like, yeah, we can fill these quotas easy, and if it turns out we fucked up later, then, like, you can't do anything to hold us accountable. And also, like, you're probably here illegal anyway because you're brown. Like, that's the underlying logic. That's the internal logic that ICE agents are probably operating off of when they're trying to meet these quotas. It's, like, literally the same thing, but worse. It's like a worse version of what the police end up doing when they're given like arrest or traffic ticket quotas. This is why so many black drivers are ticketed by the cops, because the cops know that if they hang out in poor neighborhoods and give out some like bullshit tickets, or like target high traffic areas and low income, like poorly designed sections of the city, they're more likely to meet that quota, because people are just gonna like sigh and roll with it, because like fucking I have to deal with all this shit, like I can't afford to spend so much time on this, right? And again, that's not even accounting for the fact that the cops are super racist. So they're like, if they see that a driver is black, as they're driving by or whatever, they're more likely to be a little bit skeptical of them. That's just the kind of like behavior that setting a quota for arrests necessarily encourages, It is stupid. It's not like I want to see a debate about police quotas. I mean, there's not really a debate. All it serves to do is bolster the optical, like, numbers of the police. It does nothing to address crime, and it increases the amount of expenses on both the city and its residents. Like, the city as a financial entity and the people as financial entities within the city. It's just to justify the existence of the police. It serves no greater purpose. And likewise, this serves to justify the existence of ICE. The The whole "we only want to deport violent criminals" shit is the most obvious ruse on the planet, especially if you know that during the Biden admin and Obama admin and various other administrations before this, it was already the law that if there was an undocumented person that was found to have committed a violent crime, they would be deported. That was already how things worked. They're just emphasizing it now so they have a pretext for these very flashy raids and stuff where they will arrest people who are, number one, not illegal immigrants, and number two, not criminals. You know? Because if you're doing that same thing quietly, you can just lie to everybody's faces and they'll believe you, especially if there's no counter narrative. Yeah, they want the political theater of like doing things, you know? And again, this also serves the function of like attempting to basically scare all of the remaining like the migrants and whoever else doesn't get caught up in these sweeps. Like anybody who feels like they could be at risk of these kinds of ICE sweeps is just going to get like scared, and that's the intended purpose, so that they make less of a fuss when the long arm of the state extends even further. The Void, yes, welcome to chat. Repression does not bring fewer crimes, it only tries to justify its own existence as a force of the ruling classes. But those sorry, I can't read that at the moment. By oppressing those who've been pushed to the edges of society. Yes, you're absolutely correct. You know? And that's exactly what's going on here. Yeah, I got you. You know that they're not going to deport people that are used for slave labor? Yeah, that's why a lot of this is just for show. The owning class relies a lot on basically slave labor to do all their shit for them, right? Like the whole undocumented migrant worker like hiring enables them to pay people shit wages, and if they can keep those people scared and legally very vulnerable, then they can keep paying them really, really low wages to such an extent that you're paying them next to nothing to do all your work for you. That way you don't have to hire people that would potentially demand better conditions, and you get to like increase the gap between yourself and the class below you if you're like one of these business tycoons, you know? Like, that's the purpose of all this. As much as it is also just that ICE is fucking racist and they really want to beat up and brutalize brown people, especially children, because they're very vulnerable, it is also about the business class getting what they want. So these arrest quotas, this like 1,200 per day, I think, number, is mostly rooted in that. It's a number big enough that they're going to like branch out into people that aren't criminals, aren't migrants, aren't, you know, anything of the sort that would need to be entered into that process. They're just going to arrest people at random. They're going to be terrorizing the schools and the churches. They've already been doing that to keep people scared, so that they will fall in line whenever their bosses tell them fucking work overtime. Because if they don't, they could be ratted out to ICE, regardless of whether or not they're even an illegal immigrant. We're seeing two things: populist political power, ruling class, and the economy ruling class. One lives off populist promises, impactful headlines, and hate. The other one lives off slave and wage labor of the workers. Give me a second to parse that. But yeah, I mean, I believe you're correct. Nothing there sounds like it's out of step with like anything that we're seeing right now, you know? Like, the ruling class and the far right especially loves to speak out of both sides of his mouth, because like the populism is a front for that like business class interests and stuff like that. They want the power to be able to like remain in power, basically. The ruling class recognizes that there's a threat to their power from below, so they have to redirect that threat away from them. That's why they use that like the rhetoric of populism and the like machine of hatred is all manufactured to the benefit of the ruling class. You know? So is this a new version of this track? It feels a little bit smoother. Although that could be just me. Welcome to Red Scare Part 2? Possibly. It's gonna be kind of hard to do that whole Red Scare stuff. When, like, the relationship between the US and China right now is very different from the relationship between the US and the USSR back in the day. You know? It's more like a brown scare. Like, they're trying to do a brown scare about migrants. Although, obviously, there is a lot of, like, fear-mongering and shit about China as well. Oh, no. No! Ah, damn it. Also, the division of the workers, aside from populist talking points. Yes, that is one of the biggest points of like them targeting migrants in the way that they have been, is to divide segments of the working class against each other so that they don't unite to form like a front to advance their own interests in the face of continuing repression from the owning class. You know? It's like, you guys know about the Nixon memo, where there was a Nixon administration official who was interviewed by a news outlet and was like, yeah, the war on drugs, we just made that shit up so that we could functionally make it illegal to be black or against the war in Vietnam. That way we had a justification to send the police into communities that were majority black or low income and were more likely to be against the war, and basically shake them up and you know, ruffle a bunch of feathers and scare people into line, arrest community leaders and stuff like that. You know, it's all like, all of the very real repression is like to the benefit of the ruling class. You know, like, they know they're full of shit. Ape together strong, separate ape, ape weak, if lie separate ape, ape weak. Yes. Apes together, strong. And what are humans but apes, but like kind of different? That's true. No, getting bumped as hell. Oh! The perfect combo of the banana into the fake item box. Saw that one TikTok where it said Trump didn't say he was going to do this. Man, people are... Number one, I actually don't believe them. But then number two, if that's real, which, I mean, it could be, people are fucking morons. Because that's one of the things that Trump ran on, was deporting a bunch of people. Like, what did they fucking think was going to happen? You know, like... How do you think that they say, like, yeah, we're going to deport 25 million people, which is more than the number of people that are, like, of undocumented status in this country, and then, like, you see this shit happening, you're like, whoa, I had no idea that them saying we were going to mass deport people meant them mass arresting and deporting people. Like, dog, what? Room temperature IQ moment. Trump ran against Hillary on deporting Arabs, now Hispanics. It's not new. Yeah, of course. But you know, I think a key difference is that, like, the counter narrative has severely deteriorated between then and now, actually. You know, in 2016, I think he had to go in large part for Arabs and Muslims and stuff, because the post 9/11 fervor was still very thick in the air. But ever since the Democrats stopped, like, fighting back on the issue of immigration, you know, ever since the Democrats were also like, well, you know, a border wall seems reasonable and whatnot, then the Republicans could just be like, oh, okay, so now we have the go-ahead to just say, yeah, we should deport all the immigrants, you know? because they got to advance their narrative towards its logical conclusion without any opposition from a counter narrative from the other side of things. You know, it's not good enough to take the narrative that the far right has constructed and merely say nuh-uh on television uncharismatically. You have to have a counter narrative. But again, because the Democrats also answer to the same interests that dictate that there be mass deportations and such, they can't form that counter narrative because that would upset those interests. You know? Here we go. Oh, nice. I dodged. I think I'm gonna get third here. Sure seems like it. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like people's intelligence are the same as horror movie characters. Well, look. Let's just say horror movie characters are not as unrealistic as they might seem sometimes. Irrational thought makes people do extremely stupid shit. You know, like every time somebody in the horror movie's like, let me just go investigate this fucking bump sound in the night alone. That's because they're thinking irrationally, you know? And like, as the audience, you're sitting there thinking like, this person's a fucking moron. They're gonna get themselves killed. And that's true, but a lot of people in real life, honestly, they would get caught in a similar situation and do the same thing. Honestly, tweaks me out how in 2016 he supported queer people and side by side with clips of the rhetoric he used now against them and how no one has weaponized that. Yeah, and it's because, like, again, it's like the Republican Party and the right wing, rather, the business class, the interests that are part of that far right tent have a monopoly over the media industry in the United States. And then the only meaningful opposition that they could be facing from the Democratic Party has never manifested because the Democrats were frankly never all that interested in fighting back. Because Democrats are liberals and thus representatives of the status quo, they want to defend the status quo at any cost. And that means they're not going to really defend queer people all that hard. Number one, because queer people are, well, queer. They are different. They're not yet fully integrated into the status quo. But then also because the political landscape of neoliberalism is that of stagnation and decay. And when the status quo is in character stagnant and decaying, so too will be the people defending it. The liberals have been coasting by on inertia for decades, and they want nothing more than to continue to do that. So whenever there is a need to act, i.e. not stagnate and decay with the status quo that you need to defend, they won't do it. You know, liberals will let liberalism die rather than defend it, because to defend it would be out of step with the ideology. You know? Does that make sense? If there was a non-bi-party American state, so much shit would at least be manageable. Yes, it would be. Oh my god. Like, the two-party system is so fucked in this regard. Because, like, in a coalition government system, in, like, a multi-party system, not only are there more than two parties, but parties, like, whatever party is present in politics can actually change much more frequently than in a two-party system. You know? There's a lot more dynamic action that occurs in a multi-party system than in a two-party system. The two-party system is much more immovable in a way that just perpetuates a bad status quo. Liberals think they're destiny. Yeah, what was the tweet from Hakeem Jeffries? There was a fucking tweet, and I legitimately, you could not write a parody this good of liberals, where he was like, oh, you know, presidents and administrations. I didn't mean the person destiny. No, I know. Like, Hakeem Jeffries was like, oh, you know, presidents and administrations come and go, but through all of it, God remains on his throne. Like, that was a real tweet. I had to look this up because I was like, that can't be real. Like, legitimately, I was like, I don't want to get caught by misinformation that's just really fucking convincing, right? That's a real tweet from Hakeem Jeffries. And I was like, you can't write this shit. Like, you genuinely could not write a more, like, out there caricature of liberalism if you tried. But that's real. Liberals in power, mind you. This guy is the House leader of the Democratic Party at the federal level. And he's saying, like, yeah, We don't need, he's implicitly saying, yeah, we don't need to do anything because God will supernaturally right all of the wrongs that the Republicans are doing / have done. And at the same time, by sort of just hand waving away all of the damage that the Trump administration is going to unleash on America, he is trivializing the kind of damage that the far right does. It is the perfect critique of liberalism offered with zero self-awareness by none other than one of the biggest representatives of their own ideology. It's like crazy. Oh, I was worried that red shell would hit me for a second, even though I threw it. Acceptance feels like critical thinking is a superpower. Yeah. Did you hear about the U.S. putting tariffs on Taiwan? Oh boy, did I. We're giving China the new century? Yeah. President Xi is there's a reason I titled the stream what I did. Luigi, I mean President Xi wins by doing absolutely nothing. Like, it didn't even have to do anything. The U.S. is just going to shoot itself in the foot continuously. You know? There's a box here, I need that. Sometimes non-action is the right action. Yeah, it's like, sometimes you just need to observe. Not everything needs a response. You know, sometimes what was it? Fucking never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. President Xi and the other Chinese presidents remaining motionless while observing the United States for the past 50 years or something. China winning power by just being like a weird authoritarian managed economy and doing nothing else is crazy. Yeah, it's fucking like, please excuse our friend, the United States. He is an idiot. We have purposefully trained him wrong as a joke. And then it's just America, like, I don't know, twerking itself into economic decline for half a century. When when the Earth Kingdom was arrested. Okay. With respect to Trump's actual threat for Taiwan, though, that like Trump wants to put tariffs on Taiwan, like, I don't know how much that's gonna mean, because like Trump says a lot of things. I don't know if he'll actually do it. But either way, like, sure, fucking speedrun America's decline even harder. Like, what the fuck? Or do you think the U.S. economic decline started to happen? That's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I could pinpoint one answer. But I feel like it would be sometime in the 20th century. Basically, a crazy person with the bazooka. Yeah, he might not fire the bazooka, but he's like pointing it everywhere. Europe and China are chill, but what the fuck is wrong with the U.S.? It's late stage capitalism is what's wrong with the U.S. There are a lot of economic problems in the U.S. that like Europe and China also experience, but they're so much more advanced in the United States because of like how aggressively capitalist the United States is relative to Europe and China. Like the U.S. has a really libertarian streak, but it's only with regards to involvement by the state, right? Like, the United States almost won't recognize authoritarianism if it's done by big business. Whereas there's like because consent has been manufactured to that effect. I would have a hard time, because I'm not an expert, I would have a hard time explaining the full dynamics of what I think has caused that to be the case. But ultimately, I think that's what's up. That somehow worked out. Wasn't pretty. Glad my president's moving the country closer to China than America, because that means not going to die from starvation if America goes woo. Yeah. There are a lot of countries, some people on the left have predicted this, and I don't entirely disagree with them. I think there's a point there that a lot of European countries are probably going to start distancing themselves a little bit more from America and start moving a little bit closer to China economically, just because America, under the stewardship of the Republican Party and increasingly authoritarian America dominated by the oligarchs, is like so unpredictable and unruly that even with all of the flaws of China, they're stable enough that like you'd rather be more economically involved with them. Does that make sense? People are so desperate for change, they pick fascism. Yeah, because liberalism starved them for change from the left. So all it took was what was the aesthetic and promise of change from the right appearing similar enough to what somebody on the left would say, and they rolled with it. You know, the left was structurally shut out, which left the options of the same shit or fascists screaming really loudly about how all of these problems that you're experiencing are real, but actually it's trans people and migrants and the Jews, you know? Some checks and balances. The U.S., no. Yeah, law is made up in the U.S. I think, okay, if I had to pinpoint like a micro era where I think the decline of the United States was like really cemented, I think it would be after the Second World War. You know, Marshall Plan United States, the Cold War is really ramping up. That is when I think the decline really, really started. You know, so 1950s and 60s. You start to see much more evident symptoms of this in the 70s and 80s when neoliberalism becomes a much more popular economic philosophy, and where the social state, the social safety nets, and the infrastructure that basically provided a basic subsistence floor for the poor people, when that started to be gutted is when you start to really see it. But ultimately, the logic that would introduce that, I think, was present as soon as the Second World War ended, and with the rise of the military-industrial complex. One of the biggest lessons that the United States took from the post-war era, it was like, we don't really need to put all this money towards a social state if all we need is an external threat. Like, if an external threat is enough to keep people from revolting, then all you have to do is make sure that threat is present, real or manufactured, and then put a bunch of funding into the military, and you can get away with, like, shockingly little in the way of providing for people, you know? And that's why the social safety net and civil society have decayed so much, because there is no need for the ruling class to maintain it, when all they really need to do is maintain the military. Some people say fashion no longer existed after World War II. I don't think that's true. There's plenty of, like, more modern fashion that's really cool. Oh, do you mean fascism? I have some thoughts on that. Obviously, I think they're wrong. The U.S. had a chance with FDR. They had one chance and they missed it. Yeah, honestly, I think that, like, FDR represented the potential of liberalism. Like, that he was probably the best that liberalism could offer. And anybody who operated on the logic of having a strong civil society with strong social safety programs being intensely critical of capital, that is, I think, the best form of liberalism that would eventually transform into a much more socialist appearing ideology, and that could potentially have saved America from neoliberal decline. Like, I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. Like, a lot of what FDR did was openly hostile to the business class. He was like, yeah, no, the business class literally wants to, like, plunder America, and I'm not going to let that happen, you know? Like, there's a lot of awareness of the class conflict there that is critical to the success of a country, or the success of any society. It doesn't matter what level it exists at, you know? Post-war prosperity is a myth for the most part. Yeah, it was only really, if I remember right, post-war prosperity, quote-unquote, was only really a thing for white America, you know? Like, the standard of living in the United States, the path of like, economic growth and stuff for the United States had been exemplary throughout the whole 20th century, but I do know that, like, after World War II, it took Europe a long time to rebuild, even with a lot of, like, financing and funding from the United States. But yeah, to bring that back to that question earlier, I think the decline of the United States really started with the rise of the military-industrial complex in the 1950s. That, at that point, I would say, Economic decline is inevitable due to capital's domination of the government and the state in that form, and others. What do you think is going to happen with in ICE in the future? I don't know. Predictions are hard. I really don't know. The best I can hope for is that people are like, people continue to organize the way they have been. But either way, I think it's kind of inevitable that people are going to be shook by the presence of ICE, like going around and being in the schools and in the churches and whatever. When America starts to manufacture its own enemies is when I believe we're past the point of no return. Well, in that case, then you might mark us as past the point of no return now. I mean, there's plenty of historical points of no return, right? But after the Soviet Union fell, Bernie Sanders was actually hammering on this pretty early. The United States was desperate to manufacture an enemy to justify the existence of the military-industrial complex. You know? There's plenty of video clips of him from the 1990s in Congress, you know, talking about the war in Iraq and stuff like that, and in Bosnia and Herzegovina and stuff. He's like, dog, like, yeah, we get like all the war crimes and stuff that's being committed, but the Soviet Union doesn't exist. Who are you worried about? Why are we continuing to give all of this money to the Pentagon, the organization that has failed every audit we've ever given it, right? Like, you know, Bernie Sanders was calling this out as early as the 90s. You can see what you're describing there. You know, the manufactured presence of an enemy, and that's carried on to today. You know, the conflict that the United States is engaging in, the sort of economic conflict, the trade conflict with China, exists mostly at a surface level. The United States and China don't actually have distinctly separate interests. That's why, like, both China and the United States are researching and developing AI platforms and stuff. You guys heard about what is it, DeepSeek or whatever that AI was developed by the Chinese government? The reason that both China and the United States are engaging in that is because AI does the same thing for the same people. You know, it is a wealth transferring bullshit machine that is designed to cut labor costs and basically funnel all of the wealth of society out of the hands of labor into the hands of, you know, the owning class. Both China and the United States are capitalist societies controlled by an owning class of business tycoons, so both of them are going to be pursuing the same project. But to justify that project, they have to posture and label it as an arms race. Doesn't DeepSeek do everything OpenAI does for free? Yeah. Because AI is like a bullshit technology, and you know, like all of the R&D or whatever that was supposedly happening at Silicon Valley was probably just people sitting with their thumb up their ass, you know? But yeah, it does the same thing, because fundamentally what AI does is a whole lot of incoherent nothing, you know? Like it just makes shit up as convincingly as it can. Let's hope the AI doesn't make the ruling classes start to cull people because they're no longer needed. That is one logical conclusion that you could take that to. And by the way, The Void, yes, thank you for the follow. But I really don't think that will happen. Because while the ruling class is deeply, deeply anti-human, right? They need to maintain a large enough reserve of unemployed labor. AI is just predictive text made to sound complicated. Yeah. It's a load of bullshit. It's not AI in any sense, the original term. Yeah, no, it is not actually an artificial intelligence. It's not like you know, in the Matrix, the machines are actually sentient. It's not that. Government has to put a stop on all federal loans, so I guess I'm screwed over with my FAFSA loans. Yeah. That is indeed the case. But no, the ruling classes depend too much on there being laborers to exploit and labor to exploit to cull the working population. You know, that's why the like reserve army of unemployed labor exists. There can never be full employment. And that's the purpose that AI serves, is preventing more and more people from getting employment, so that any people you do employ can be employed basically for free. And also AI serves as basically like a lazy stopgap that the rich can use to make it so that they don't really need to be people. Like, if rich people are very insulated from the rest of society, I assure you they are not good at being people. So they, like, try to split the difference with AI, basically, because they don't understand what being a person is like, so they try to outsource. They literally are trying to outsource their own life and personality to a fucking algorithm bullshit machine, so they don't have to, like, go outside and socialize with anybody that could potentially be part of the unwashed masses. If the ruling class ends up being AI, I would cry. Well, suffice it to say, I don't think we're there yet. My job future is looking pretty dark. I'm sorry to hear that. But you know, yeah. But I actually don't know what else to say. I'm sorry. There we go. Trans girl electrician. I'm cooked. I mean, a lot of people are cooked for a lot of reasons, and yeah, being trans is gonna kind of suck. But your job is not easily replaceable by AI. If AI designs the electrical inner workings of a building, that shit is coming down to an electrical fire in like a few months' time, tops, you know? And a lot of times, as scary as this prospect may be, and it varies state to state, if you're like confident enough in your own identity and casual enough with it, people aren't really going to do the whole public transvestigation bit. This is not me saying that you shouldn't be scared, right? Because, I mean, like, there's a lot of reason for concern when the government is coming down so hard on the existence of trans people. But, like, you picture a potential scenario where, like, you're going into a public bathroom. How insane would somebody have to be to, like, go up to you, like, be looking for you, pick you out of a crowd of people going into the bathroom, or even just pick you, you know, as you're heading towards the bathroom and be like, I don't think you're really a woman. Pull down your pants right now. Like, that's unhinged. You know? Even with Republicans, I think they're actually too big of cowards to do that in a public setting. Yeah, ma'am, may I see your genitals? No, I'm calling the cops. That is sexual harassment. Maybe don't call the cops because we know what the cops do, but like, what I'm saying is carry pepper spray. All right. Hate the term DEI, motherfucker. The concept was just giving people the U.S. has been stomping on for decades a chance to have upwards movement. Oh yeah. Pepper, taser. Yes, whatever you feel is appropriate. But like, it does take actually a really, really insane kind of person to go and do that, you know? So I think a pepper spray or a taser would be like good deterrent. Be like, motherfucker. But yeah, like, even, you know, with Republicans being who they are, half the reason, or a large part of the reason that they support what policies they do with respect to, you know, really marginalized communities, is that they're massive fucking cowards. And they are genuinely terrified of trans women, of black people, of migrants, of whatever. So they need the long arm of the state to be able to repress them, because up close, they like, if they ever encountered one of these people in public, they would shrivel and be like that guy in the one comic on the other side of the street. With, you know, there's like a normal guy wearing his hat and he's whistling, he's walking along, then that, like, the guy on the other side of the street, like, look at that fucking degenerate, I can't believe that he's allowed to, but like cowering in fear from 20 feet away. You know? That's what Republicans are like in real life. Either that, or they're like grill-pilled and don't really care that much. You know, there is still an exceedingly rare kind of Republican that's like really grill-pilled and is ultimately like cool with minorities, but then they're like, yeah, Republicans mean good economy, so I vote for them. You know, which is its own kind of dumb, but you know, preferable. Have you seen Happy Roadkill comics? They're pretty good. I believe I've heard the name. Let me look this up. Happy Roadkill comics. Eh. think I've seen some shit from this guy before. Comrade Catboy. This guy sounds like my cup of tea. If my family said what they say behind closed doors, they would be charged with hate crimes. I hope they do get charged with hate crimes. That sounds like some dumb shit. Kind of reminds me of the late Roman Empire, where they became increasingly repressive and mysticist as they declined. Yeah, and these are markers of societal decline. Literally, I am an archaeologist. I can recognize this shit as it's happening. My degree is in archaeology. You know, I've looked at ceramics from societies as part of like class assignments from their peak and from their decline, and there's a marked difference between the artistic themes and even the quality of construction. I assure you, if any of the like political material from the 21st century survives long enough for archaeologists to like get a look at it, everybody in the archaeological community, in the academic community, will be like, oh yeah, this was a very, very severe period of decline. Like, even down to like really deteriorating city structure and construction standards, right? Like, it's everywhere. And of course the reactionism is going to be a symptom of that, because trans people have existed since forever. Like, everybody loses sight of this in the discourse that, of course, that isn't trans or that isn't intimately familiar with the subject matter. But like, being trans is not a new thing. Again, this is where my expertise in archaeology relative to most people helps me. There is evidence of trans people existing as far back as like we have documentation of human society. Like, literally, you could go back and look at Babylon and Assyria thousands and thousands of years ago, and there are trans people. In fact, trans people were pretty fucking important to the religion in those days. You know? A lot of them were priests. Or at least a lot of the ones that we know about, because that's where, you know, there's like a survivorship bias. That's where we have documents from, so that's what we see. Funny that people in the Until Dawn game are smarter than these people. I mean, I guess most competently written characters are smarter than like the majority of people. Like, a person is, again, like Men in Black. I can't believe that Men in Black was so based in sociology pilled at the time that it was written. Like, a person is smart. People are dumb and panicky and reactionary, like, as a group unit. It's very easy, if you address people as a group, to instill reactionism. But at the same time, you also have to, like, isolate them. You have to instill groupthink in people on a one-on-one basis to manufacture and maintain this kind of reactionism. I've heard that modern architecture is relatively horrific compared to older housing and shit. Yeah, there is some modern architecture that looks good, but there's also a lot of it that's just for the sake of cheaping out on construction costs and materials. And obviously cost is a valid factor when you're thinking about like building a city and stuff. But like, a lot of it really does just look very uninviting and plain, and honestly reminds me of the kind of shit that the Nazis would build, just using less sturdy materials. Like, if you see some of the architecture from Nazi Germany, it's very bland and like alienating and just not like good. Like, it's just very poorly designed and not aesthetically pleasing in any meaningful way. But it all used like concrete and stuff, because they didn't have these, like, they didn't have cheap prefab stuff. So that's what the construction is now. But yeah, that's also a marker of like societal decline, is the no, actually not brutalism. I have a soft spot for brutalism, and I'm very familiar with what brutalist styles look like. Nazi architecture is like a sloppy imitation of brutalism. It's meant to be inhuman, but not in an artistic sort of way where you take the... Yes, eco-brutalism, my beloved. It's not like and a more artistic kind of brutalism, some of which you may have seen in the Soviet Union or you see in other places today, where it's supposed to take what would otherwise be like very dull and alienating materials and facades and basically twist them into shapes that look very interesting and cool and potentially inviting. You know, brutalism is like a challenge, and a good architect and a good builder can meet that challenge and even exceed it to make brutalism look good and inviting, such as the case with some brutalist buildings in the city where I live and in DC, and with ego brutalism. But what the Nazis did made no attempt to be appealing at a human level. They wanted everything to be imposing and inhuman. So I wouldn't even necessarily call what the Nazis did brutalism. I genuinely think that would be like an insult to brutalism and brutalism enjoyers, such as myself. Industrial brutalism? Yeah, that's one of the brutalist styles of the 20th century that I think can be made look good. The only thing fascists know is power. Yeah. Remember the holiday resort they tried to build and look like post-Soviet flats, Lamau? Yeah. Yeah, Nazis are anti-art, so they're incapable of producing good art. That's why they had the museum exhibit for degenerate art. Because everybody loves that shit. Nobody likes Nazi art. Trans puppy girl mystic priests who are depressed and just want to hit the ball. Fucking true! History's strongest warriors, let me tell you. They appear every now and then in the historical record. In a way, I do kind of also like the ability of brutalism to be big and imposing, but I think you can use that. You can use that to basically make it a monument to human construction and achievement. You can make it a very human thing if you're making like dwellings that are brutalist with basically like, you know, these warm colors of like rock and concrete and stuff, where you say, look at the kind of massive structures we are able to build for people, not necessarily for you to look at from a distance, but for people to use, to live in, and like, you know, I guess this is where you get a lot of eco-brutalism, is that it's not just the building. It's like you use the materials and aesthetic of brutalism to build the sturdiest skeleton that you can find, and then the sturdiest skeleton that you can, and then you fill it with warm colors, with plants, with life, and with social character, and with, like, you know, all sorts of stuff. And that, I think, is brutalism done right. Genuinely wonder how you'd analyze meme culture and degeneration from an archaeological viewpoint. That is something I've wondered as well, especially during my archaeology classes in college. I was thinking about this, and I think we had some discussions of it on occasion, that eventually there is going to be a time where the digital existence of the 21st century is going to be long enough ago that archaeologists will start to pick through it as part of the material record. And I actually don't fully know, even being part of the contemporary, like, information, disinformation, like, meme landscape, I don't really know how you're gonna, in what way you could make heads or tails of some of this stuff. I guess you could, since memes fundamentally are meant to be humorous, are meant to be jokes in somewhat of a different format, are meant to be, like, funny and socially relevant and critiquing the current state of society, you could kind of use the genre of humor to be a loose barometer for where general societal sentiment is. You know, there's a lot of like, haha, I'm fucking depressed and life is meaningless kind of memes out there, and you could use that as like an indication of like, oh wow, life was really not great right now. When the Skibbity Sigma Riz Ohio becomes historical, how do you even analyze it? I don't know. You would probably have to method act that shit, right? You have to get in the mindset of a Zoomer or somebody from Gen Alpha from the 21st century. You have to start wearing the gold chains. You have to get the broccoli cut, acquire the broccoli cut. You have to get tatted up, and you have to start twerking, right? you have to stick your gut out for the Rizzler, and you have to do this in Ohio, right? Like, you guys know the Daniel Day-Lewis method acting, whatever. You have to do that, and then you will start to understand what the Skibbity memes are about, and then you can analyze them. That's a very elaborate way of saying I actually don't know. This sounds like a different dialect of English to me, Lamau. It very well might be. This is one thing that a lot of people will rag on is neologisms. But, you know, language changes a lot over time. Even shit that we would consider modern English a few hundred years ago, fucking almost unintelligible to people today. You know, and then obviously a lot of the shit that we're saying today is going to be unintelligible to people 200 years ago or 200 years from now, you know? That's kind of how language changes and evolves. Like, one thing that I've actually noticed, and you could actually use this as a marker of societal decline or at least hardship, is the presence of swear words more and more. That is not to say that using swears is bad. I think that it's based, and personally, I really enjoy swearing like a fucking sailor. But I've heard a lot more people in professional context just casually use the word like shit. You know, like a turn of phrase like, oh yeah, you know, shit like that. People will say that a lot more casually nowadays. You know? I had another star. Ah! Mods, report me for cheating. The concept of swears is stupid. Yeah, a lot of swear words in English are of Germanic root, and were sort of frowned upon by, like, the Norman ruling class in England or whatever. At least that's what I've heard, where, like, a lot of swear words will be of, in English are of different roots than some of the other parts of the language, and they were, like, taboo as a method of suppressing very common things that you would say in that language. Spanish is, like, one of the languages with the most insults, so I don't know what to make of it. I think it probably means that Spanish speakers are spicy. And I'm okay with that. Although it is also true that, like, if we're using the same metric, Spain has also been, like, an empire in decline. You know, the Spanish Empire reached its heyday probably in the 18th century, and for a lot of the 19th and 20th century, they were in a period of more imperialistic decline, you know, losing colonial possessions and stuff like that. As a Spaniard, we're like, weird? Oh, you're a Spaniard. Nice. Pretty much they originally just referred to the literal meanings and the Normans didn't like it. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a village called Shitterton in the UK. Completely inoffensive in the Anglo-Saxon period. Yeah, because that was just how a word. That was just a word in Anglo-Saxon. But then the Normans were like, we don't like that. This is some goofy shit. Ow! But yeah, I guess if I had to take a stab at it, the increasing surrealism, detachment from reality, and glib nature of a lot of memes are going to be good indicators in the future for archaeologists to note periods of societal decline, potentially. You know, that's my best, like, educated guess for that. But I can't say for sure because the internet is still, like, a historically very recent phenomenon, and memes are, like, also kind of recent in a similar time frame. There are memes that predate the internet. For example, you know, a lot of political campaigning and sloganeering was very mimetic for its day. Like I don't know if anybody has seen this poster of FDR, like one of FDR's campaigns, where he literally depicts himself as, like, the new age urban infrastructure, steel train, like Giga Chad, complete with a chiseled jawline. And then he depicts, I think it's meant to be like Hitler or the Nazis, as these like ugly, smoke-filled, like billowing coal trains by comparison. Okay was political slang? Yeah, it was. I think there's gonna have to be a reconciliation that what we now call memes have been like a part of history for a long time, and we maybe just need to recognize certain things as by name memetic, so that we're better able to draw analogs between stuff that we can already see and like online culture, basically. Okay, barely landed that. And I am in third with no item. Yeah, Chad FDR versus version Nazis. You don't want to recognize that? That would make them sound unoriginal? What do you mean? Like, the academic community? I don't think the academic community, like archaeologists, I don't think they would have that big of an objection to sort of drawing that parallel. You know? I mean, internet people? Oh! Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people that are just not very interested in critically analyzing internet culture. Because there's a lot of, like, there's a lot of people that subscribe to a very South Park mentality that caring about things and being interested in things is cringe. Don't you know you're supposed to be performatively uninterested and jaded about everything? I mean, this is a period of societal decline. But no, you know, we are autism havers here. We all experience a touch of the tism, so, you know, we like things, particularly trains. For example, a train that is made of steel and has FDR's face on the front of it and a chiseled jawline. Chris Chan and their internet culture impact in 200 years is going to be crazy study to read. True, that is going to go so crazy in fucking... In the year 2200. Be like, the impact of Chris Chan on 21st century internet culture. Vis-a-vis 4chan. And Twitter. Like, legit, somebody could and maybe even should write a study about that when the time comes. Don't forget the lesson about Pepe the Frog in schools in the future. God, that's so true. People are gonna have to... They're gonna have to learn about that shit in American government class. Or like, if America doesn't exist, in, like, their politics class. After this race, I think, I'm gonna pull the, I'll be able to pull the text list of stuff. Apparently cavemen have been drawing dicks for at least 12,000 years. Yeah, dude, one of people's favorite pastimes, as long as drawing has been a thing, we love just drawing giant cock and balls everywhere. You know about the Herms? You know about the, in ancient Greece, God, these people were gay as fuck. In ancient Greece, there were, you know, Hermes was actually the god of, like, he was the god of traveling, I think, and like fertility, I think, and stuff like that. Human race is horny. That's very true. And there were actually along major thoroughfares and routes in ancient Greece, in ancient Greek like city-states. There were these statues called the Herms on the side of the road, where basically it was a bust of Hermes, you know, like the statue, the head and the shoulders, and then it was like a rectangle, but there was a giant cock and balls at the anatomically correct position where the cock and balls should be. And I shit you not, if you were a traveler, in order to pray for the protection of Hermes, you would go and lube up the cock and balls for good luck. I only wish I made that shit up. That is real. Sometimes The Herms were not even a statue. It was just a pedestal with a giant dick on top of it. And you would then go and lube up the dick for good luck on your travels. I'm not making up any of this shit. You can feel free to fact check anything that I've said during that. I can believe it with how horny the Greeks were. Oh yeah. It's one of those things that at the same time, I can fully believe it, but it's also hilarious. You know? And with the pedestal, it was like a column, right? You know how they had like the square bit on the top and bottom? It was literally presenting the cock and balls to you, a giant cock and balls made out of stone to be lubed up. And then you go and you're like, oh, I am a traveler. I must lube up Hermes' giant cock and balls as presented to me through this effigy for good luck on my journey, so I may make it to the next town safely. And then you did that. And that was just, everybody did that, apparently. Republicans would call you liars if you told them. Maybe. I have half a mind that they would just say, man, the Greeks were degenerate, and then go back to idolizing the Greeks. Republicans would vote against teaching Arabic numerals in school. I think they already did that. They had like a virtue signal vote in a couple of red states. And then somebody was like, hey, dumbass. Like, Arabic numerals are what we learn. The, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are Arabic numerals. What, do you want kids to learn Latin numerals? Dead fucking language? Like, yeah, good luck. Ow, you got me. Damn it, I said I was going to pull up my text list of stuff, and I completely fucking forgot, because I was too busy talking about Hermes and his giant stone cock and balls that you would go lube up on the side of the road. Ooh, almost. Alright, I'm going to get rid of this last one, just throw it back. This. This track is legitimately kind of challenging to drive. Alright, cool. Whew. There's a lot of material for me to go through on this stream if I want to make stuff into segments and clip some shit, which is good. Next race. Oh, for people in chat who are actually wondering about this, I know 1v3 suggested that I make a tier list of ideologies. I actually have some ideas for that. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find a tier list that accommodates what I will want to do, but I think I'm going to start with that next week. MLM, others. Oh, possibly. What I would call like the more micro ideologies within ideologies, I will get to on a separate model, but the first thing I want to do is just address what I think are the big 3 ideologies. Egoism, Max Stirner moment. That's true. Max Stirner is at S tier. Egoism is not S tier, but Max Stirner is, because he's funny. Yeah, what I wanted to do many times before, I've said that, like, functionally, to me, there are 3 ideological umbrellas that everything else falls under. You can have liberalism, socialism, or fascism, right? And that is contextually within the context of a capitalist world, where the status quo is liberal capitalism. You have 3 ideologies, right? That doesn't count ideologies that are that were the status quo before but are now dead. So like feudalism wouldn't necessarily fit onto that tier list. I've read Sterner. Honestly, his analysis of the self is giga-based. I have not read Sterner. But I'll believe you. A lot of anarchists, whether they call themselves whatever, as long as they're not anarcho-capitalists, they usually have some based shit to say. But yeah, so like a lot of sub-ideologies, a lot of like the you know, social democracy would straddle the line, mostly fit in liberalism, but it would be closer to socialism. And then like Marxism, Leninism, whatever, would either be under socialism or fascism, depending on the character of the like what they mean by Marxism or Marxism-Leninism. There's a lot of like room to move within that. And then there's stuff like anarcho-syndicalism, which would be socialism. There's stuff like, well, liberalism and neoliberalism, which would be liberalism straddling the line between that and fascism. Just to give you an idea, I think. But apart from that, there was also, like... There's been other stuff happening today. Well, not today specifically, but, like, recently that I wanted to kind of address and go through. Mega boils down to, you have an ego, and your ego makes you do shit. And to please that ego, you do shit. Be it hate yourself, help others, or other shit. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually sounds pretty similar to, at least from what I remember, Freud's concept of the ego. This is the part where we find out, like, I don't know when, if Max Stirner was writing before or after Freud's, like, one of them just went to the same university or some shit, learned the same thing. I don't know. There's some goofy connections like that back in the day. Okay. Bro. Who is ready for the next once-in-a-lifetime pandemic this decade? He also argues that your ego interacts with others can be molded and overridden by other people and shit. Ah! That sounds a lot like the superego. The ego and the superego and stuff. We love pandemics? Yeah. I talked about this a little bit last stream. Avian flu or SARS-3. I think it's unlikely to be SARS-3. Because SARS and coronavirus are very closely related, and we spent the past fucking several years dealing with coronavirus. It's more likely in my mind. Yeah, SARS is a strain of coronavirus. I think, to me, it's more likely that we get, like, a bird flu pandemic. Especially because, as I highlighted last stream, as I will reiterate now, and potentially expand upon, yeah, I remember that. The administration, like, the Trump administration froze all communications from the CDC and NIH and, like, other government health organizations, which has resulted in disastrous shit. It resulted in a lot of grants being frozen and stuff like that, and it resulted in people getting their cancer treatments interrupted. Like, people can't get fucking treated by the NIH or the CDC or whatever government organization for cancer because Trump was like, we're putting a hold on all that shit. Yeah, making America healthy again by declaring war on all cancer patients. But then also there has been, like, not unrelatedly, there's been, like, a ton of outbreaks of bird flu in livestock. There's been a lot of culling. There's been, like, prices have already been affected by this, predictably so. And there have been a lot of, like, bird to, like, avian to bovine and avian to human transmissions of the bird flu. What there haven't been yet that we got to really watch out for are human to human transmissions. The moment there's a human to human transmission of the bird flu, we're in pandemic territory, and it's gonna be pretty fucking bad. Coronavirus, when that was a thing, coronavirus adapted very quickly, but that also meant that it wasn't very lethal. It was really bad. A lot of people did die. But compared to something like the bird flu, compared to an influenza, coronavirus is less likely to kill you. It is possibly as likely or more. There are a lot of long-term health effects, and chronic conditions that people can suffer as a result of having the coronavirus. But ultimately, you are very likely, if you catch the coronavirus, especially if you're vaccinated, you're very likely to survive. It's going to be really unpleasant, but you'll survive. The flu, a little bit worse, probably going to kill more people, and additionally, this is with a more unopposed Trump administration that has already dismantled the hastily reassembled pandemic response team. Coronavirus occurred late in Trump's presidency, late enough that Biden was able to come in, restore the pandemic response team, etc., etc. They were able to do something. This is very early in the Trump presidency. We're still only barely more than a week in. It is January 28th as I'm recording/streaming this, if this ends up being a segment. If a pandemic breaks out, the Trump administration is going to, at best, have a very incompetent response. And either way, it's going to ravage the United States. Flu doesn't always spread that fast, but this administration would happily allow it to go way out of hand. Yes, and a lot of the reason why they will do that, part of the reason that they've frozen communications, they just don't want to get the optics hit. If an outbreak of this stuff happens, right, like they want to try to deal with it just behind closed doors, cover up the whole thing, like we all saw the attitude that they took very early in the in the fucking coronavirus pandemic, denying that it was here, denying how many cases there were. That was a lot of what the COVID conspiracism came from as well. A lot of COVID conspiracism was started on purpose or inadvertently by the own words of the Trump administration, or at least extended out from that, because they were denying the undeniable. They were denying that COVID existed. They denied that there were any cases in the US. They denied that there were any deaths. Even as the cases and deaths continued to pile up day after day. Everybody in Europe did the same. Believe me when I tell you that Europe's reaction to the coronavirus was much more coherent and well conducted than the United States. Even though I would argue, obviously, there's going to be mismanagement in a situation this severe by any country like that you could think of. However bad Europe's reaction to it was, and it was pretty bad in some countries, in America it was worse, And imagine how bad it's going to be with RFK Jr. as the Secretary of Health. Also, European, it got bad here. Yeah, it is worth noting, if whichever European governments that had conservative parties controlling them, European countries that had conservative governments unambiguously fared worse than those that had liberal or left-leaning governments, because those conservative governments were much more, because of the international consolidation of capital, they were much more likely to have underlying anti-vax sentiment within government and very conspiracy and denial-oriented attitudes towards the pandemic, which makes things worse. But since the United States is in many ways the exporter of that sentiment, it's really bad here. But the difference where you could very easily see that in a way Europe maybe got it worse, the United States recovered a lot quicker. But yeah, all that to say that the risk currently, as stated by the CDC, is low but not remote. And that worries me because there's an incentive for scientists to downplay how big the threat is, because if they try to represent it accurately, then nobody in government's going to take them seriously, and people in government aren't going to take them seriously anyway, because let's be real, this is a government in a liberal capitalist world. But like, them even saying that it's no longer a remote risk should be kind of a red flag. Yeah, what government does take scientists seriously, really? It's going to get pretty bad, I think, if pretty quick, if we see human-to-human transmission. I don't know how often, like, an influenza virus mutates relative to, like, a coronavirus. So I don't really know how, like, how long we have until there's a human-to-human transmission, but like, given that it really wouldn't take much, I think we need to be like buckling our seatbelts and just make sure that you're like ready for a person-to-person advice. Make sure that you have masks at the ready and stuff like that, and that you're ready to basically take some very similar to precautions to what happened during the COVID pandemic. You know, always be washing your hands, and like, if you're sick, obviously wear a mask, but you know, if things really start breaking out, then definitely wear a mask and stuff like that. You know, we are not in for a fun time. And this would be like, there are a number of ways that economic mismanagement could occur. This might be one of the most painful. Especially with like with one of the biggest items of Trump and his administration's agenda being the deregulation of industries like the food and drug industry. That, like, you know, it is entirely possible that like the pandemic is only worsened by whatever the Trump administration decides to do to that effect. You know, because Trump is running the government, like he's openly said several times, he wants to run a government like he runs a business. And businesses, let's just say that the way you run a business does not account for managing a pandemic or like a disease outbreak very well. You know, that stuff would all be managed from the perspective of profits, which is usually not super compatible with human life. Yeah, it like, until any of this actually happens, it's really hard for me to say anything other than like, it would be really bad and dangerous, and make sure you're ready. Yeah. You know, I mean, it would be nice to be able to stop it from happening to begin with, but again, given the tendencies of this administration, they've already dismantled the pandemic response team. They've already put a hold on all communications between the like major health agencies. I don't know that there's much that we can do about it. Especially because it's like one of those things that hasn't really happened yet. You know, people are so preoccupied with ICE raiding everywhere, and with like oligarchs running amok in the government, and like them deciding to just pump $500 billion into AI for no reason at all. And with the construction of a surveillance state and whatever, like, yeah, it really is like, we're bracing for impact. There's not much we can do to avoid it. You know, this is one of the consequences. At some point, it's likely that avian flu will spread to humans. It's already spread to humans. But there hasn't been any human-to-human transmission. There have been a number of workers at farms and meat industry plants that have, that have come down with it. Yeah, okay, I gotcha. But yeah, and this is what tends to happen when fascists run amok in government. And again, this is another indicator of widespread societal decline that is visible in the archaeological record. Have there been any fatal outcomes yet? I don't know. I don't know if there have been any deaths. I would actually have to look back at that. I think I had a page open the other day from the CDC. I don't know if they were reporting that anybody had died. But yeah, like this is something that's been visible for a long time in the material record of societies in stages of decline, is that you see a very increased presence of disease in populated areas because of like, well, I guess in a way in like because of declining standards of living and stuff like that, and just a an infrastructure that's no longer capable of managing disease outbreaks when they do happen or preventing them. That's part of what really got to the Roman Empire, is that like not two-thirds, one third of the population of the Roman Empire in the time of Marcus Aurelius was killed by a plague. In that case, there really wasn't anything they could do. But either way, like it shows up in the material record. Apathy and disease are big killers they're like society killers. And right now we definitely have one of those. We have apathy and stagnation. And then we're about to get, pestilence again. In religion, people be like, this is Armageddon. Yes, it is also the case that in declining societies, religion hits like all-time peaks. Like religious rhetoric really surges in societies in decline because every religion has a doomsday prophecy. And so whenever there's a large-scale decline in society, economic decline, life gets worse and stuff like that, many people seek the refuge of an easy explanation. And what easier explanation than things are getting worse because it says so in the Holy Book. This is just as written. The Lisan al-Gaib will come and save us or something. How bad would it be for you if America collapses? Well, I live in the DC area, and I have a part-time job, so I feel like it'd probably be pretty bad. I feel like it would be really bad for a lot of people if America collapsed, and I'm definitely on that list. Or Cook should have left politics in 2024. Yeah, the world should have simply hit the pause button in 2024. Fucking, guy watching TV should have hit, like, pause. I don't like where this is going. Let me turn off the TV. And then we've gone too far. Don't think like that. That's how liberals think. I know. I'm mostly joking. I'm riffing and stuff like that. No, like if America collapses, I don't think it's going to look the same way as traditional imperial collapse does, or maybe it will. Who knows? I think if any of you have heard of the book The Disunited States of America, I think that's what it's likely to look like. A weakening federal government that is increasingly unwilling to address the root causes of societal issues with what power it does have, with society becoming increasingly more and more fractured and generally very reactionary and nationalistic, but this time like at a smaller level. Like kind of the worst elements of deglobalization, America collapsing would have gigantic ripple effects. Oh yeah, it absolutely would. Such a weird idea, America getting conquered. It's not going to be conquered. America's collapse. Empires don't really collapse from them getting conquered. They collapse under the weight of their own internal contradictions, right? The issues that they suffer from at an internal level. And if we're talking about like conquered from the inside, right? Then like America has already been conquered from the inside by corporate interests and like moneyed interests that know no borders or like priorities beyond their own wallets, In that sense, you could say that like America has been conquered by the owning class, I suppose. I think it'll be comfortable after its collapse. We'll see. I mean, there have been some conflicting evidence as to what happens to the standard of living after like an empire and empire hits like a crescendo of collapse. Like, there's some material to indicate that after the Bronze Age collapse, one of the biggest societal collapses in history, there's some evidence that we have that suggests, actually, there's a decent deal of evidence that suggests that life actually got better once the empires of the Bronze Age had finished collapsing. Similarly, after the Roman Empire collapsed, there's not really that much of an indication of life getting worse from that point, if that makes sense. Like, life was getting worse up to and including that collapse, but then after that, it didn't get worse. I don't know. Look, it's possible. I would certainly like for my life not to, end, as it were. And I don't know that the collapse of the United States even is going to happen in my lifetime, but societies come and go. It happens. In my happy reality, Republicans would not exist. True. The only Republicans that are allowed to exist are the Irish Republicans. They're cool. Everybody else gets fucked. That calls themselves a Republican. American Republicans, French Republicans, get them out of here. No more. Irish Republicans, you're cool. You can stay. It's going to be really funny when they start blaming Democrats, even though they have no power. Yeah. Someone would just come to fill the void, assuming public support for those policy continues. In a way, yeah. Like, the Democratic Party, I think, is on its way out. I think that, like, probably the collapse of the Democratic Party would like, be actually pretty good for left politics in the United States, because then that provides an in for the left, maybe. Yeah, the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party realizes that the left could assume a prominent position in politics, they will actually fight to their last breath to prevent that from happening. I have no doubt. Republicans are going to try to keep Democrats alive. Like, see, we're not dictators. Yeah, I can see that for sure. That, like, Republicans want to keep the two-party system alive so that it doesn't, like, the blatant one-party control isn't, like, super obvious to most people. So they can be like, see, we're not dictators. We have the Democratic Party. They're allowed to disagree with us. But then, like, in reality, it's, like, still just one-party state shit. I think if you mini turbo here, you can actually, yeah, you can go over this. That's cool. Well, okay. Cheeky bastard. What, you motherfucker? Stream snipers. Moment. Right-wing social media giants deserve to die. Yeah, and the current system cannot pervade indefinitely. That's kind of what internal issues and contradictions do. They like weigh down a system. The tech giants and whatnot. It's increasingly the way that the economy is run is turning everything into a bubble. Eventually, with the decline of certain states and whatever, there is going to be a big, giant economic collapse. The more that economies get consolidated into this bubble of like AI and speculative investment and the big tech, social media giants and whatever, and like dead internet theory, the more of that happens, the more there's like their days are numbered, basically, as the oligarchs and stuff like that. So they will. I don't know when is gonna happen, but like this model of like speculative everything is like cannot persist indefinitely. Eventually one bubble is going to pop, and because of how intertwined everything in economics is, that's going to mean that like basically every bubble pops all at the same time. And if we're vigilant, that might mean that we get you know, FDR and Huey Long too, you know, as a treat. So that'd be nice. No! Damn it. Okay. Nice try, idiot. You are not getting my Mega Thundercloud. Not today. No! Damn it. Alright. Oh, you're gonna get it now. No, I fucked it up. Shout out Napoleon Dynamite. He's in the room right now. Oh, shit. Oh, yeah, you're right. He's somewhere up there. I remember seeing him earlier. I'm just going to use this here. I'm really far behind. God damn, first is so far up there. That actually didn't do all that much for me. Oh, yes. Shock into the boxes. Let's go. Ow. How did he drift tighter than me and not get hit there? I'm confused. Okay. Fire movie? Yeah, I've seen it. Ping? Oh, yeah. Fucking latency. Yeah, there's Napoleon. Bro, it's him. Yeah, bullet only taking you one spot up is Mario Kart speak for you're fucked, mate. It's like, damn, alright, cool, bullet. This is one of the tracks where the bullet's not as good because there are some faster routes that it doesn't take. It takes wide lines and stuff. Oh yeah, I want to highlight there's one more bit of like, oh wow, we are in a period of societal decline kind of news. And then there was some more positive stuff that I wanted to talk about. I don't want to leave everybody being like, the world is ending and there's nothing I can do. The world is experiencing great turmoil, but that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. Where was it? It was, what the hell? I didn't press the close button on that. Get that open. Okay. Here we go. From Alejandra Caraballo, who I have referred to on other streams and stuff. Here's what is impacted by the freeze on federal grants. It was a categorical freeze on grants from the new administration. And a lot of things were affected. A lot of departments were affected. You have HHS, Department of Education, Department of Housing and Urban Development. I think that's just a few. Obviously, I think the CDC as well and the NIH were affected by this. Basically, you could basically just imagine a government agency that does something good, and it was impacted by the freeze of money, of federal money in the form of grants going to these places. And so begins, the plundering of the administrative state. This is one of the things that the types such as Trump and Milei in Argentina have promised to do and have actually delivered on, is gutting the administrative state. The issue therein lies that a lot of what the administrative state does is actually, like, good stuff sometimes, Especially with stuff like the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They're actually, providing some benefit to society insofar as they are allowed to by whichever administration is currently in power and the interest that governs said administrations, etc., etc. Because the entire purpose of it is to bring down the cost of housing and increase the amount of housing that people are easily able to access, Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, Department of Justice, Homeland Security even got hit by this, the EPA, the Veterans Affairs, the Department of Interior, the Small Business Administration, the DOD as well. Now, National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities. And most of this is discretionary stuff. Any of this stuff could be impacted, but what's important is they're freezing all of this to be like, okay, we're actually going to go through, the Trump administration is saying, like, we're actually going to go through and pick and choose what we want to keep. Which means, to me, probably the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security are off the chopping block, for the most part. They're obviously going to keep those. But there are a lot of programs in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, all of that stuff that is meant to foster development from the bottom up. So take capital and resources that is available to the government, infuse it at, sort of the bottom of society where it is needed, and try to make artistic development and housing development happen in a way that, like, benefits people that are in that are in a low income kind of living situation. It's obviously, a lot of it will be means tested and extremely flawed from the perspective of how a liberal state is run, but it's like more than nothing, and it's some of the very limited good that governments elect to do. There's a lot of good that governments can do, but there's not a lot that they ultimately decide, like, yeah, we should do this. And I know that there's been a lot of discourse, or there was one of the campaign promises was that we will get rid of the Department of Education, not just, like, cut funding or whatever, but, like, get rid of it entirely. And that's, of course, that's the point. The Department of Education, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the National Endowment for the Arts, for the Humanities, the Department of Health and Human Services, whatever, is not ultimately necessary for the perpetuation of the owning class, of the ruling class, the oligarchs. They don't need that. We do, So this is like... this is exactly the point of a Trump presidency. This is actually what Trump and his other, like, his oligarch homies want to do. Because they're running the government like a business. They want to pad their bottom line. And that housing and urban development, funding for the arts and all that, that's not necessary for padding the bottom line. So they're going to defund all that. And basically, I wouldn't be altogether surprised if we see the state basically revert to kind of an earlier version of itself, where they keep the mechanisms of enforcement of, like, the DHS and DOD and stuff like that. They keep all the guys with guns that'll do what the bureaucrats say, what the bureaucrats and the oligarchs and whoever else tell them to, but they get rid of the programs that basically make living a working class life not literally the worst thing on earth, Yeah, banana. I don't know. No, that government spending is going back to the people who voted Trump. Well, I can think of maybe a very small handful of people who voted Trump who are going to see benefits from some of that. But for the vast majority of them, you're right, because they are working class. Yeah, anybody who works for a living, they're not seeing any of this. They're not seeing any of the benefits from that. You know? Random. In fact, I wanted to also look at a particular example of this. I found a video clip from Ken Klippenstein. Shoutouts. Congressman Rich McCormick says of potential cuts to free school lunches for children, program that is not, as far as I know, nationally implemented in the United States, but there's been some discourse around as one of the big social programs that could really help. Hey, I worked my way through high school. Since before I was even 13 years old, I was picking berries in the field before we had child labor laws. Basically saying, I suffered, so everybody else should also suffer. You know? Kids going hungry at school is good, actually. This is the main, like, policy objective of the Republican Party. Just defund anything and everything that benefits the working class in order to hollow out the country and consolidate wealth and power at the top. I'd rather give my money to the government that probably helps me rather than give it to the government and then them, like, not help me. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You know, schools are funded by taxes. Yeah, and they say demons don't exist. You know, we just saw one from sitting in a House congressional seat. Who'd have thunk it? You know? Particularly education is a big demon for the Republican Party, in the sense that they don't like it. Because anybody with a modicum of education is more likely to develop the consciousness that the country is being raped, pillaged, and plundered by the owning class, and, you know, then fucking they might want to do something about that. If you keep people hungry, desperate, and stupid, they are theoretically in some ways less likely to, you know, overthrow the ruling class. There are ways in which this can backfire very spectacularly, but that's the objective. By removing education for the masses and consolidating the ability to be educated in only the hands of the few, they're basically trying to create a 1984-esque society where life for the proles and maybe even for, like, I don't know, some in the outer party is or whatever is absolute shit. Meanwhile, there's a very small class of autocrats and oligarchs that rule everything that are maybe not living it up, but comparatively have, like, all the power in the world. You know? But such a situation is not tenable. Eventually, there's going to be a realization of the class divide. The harder you try to create that class divide, the easier it is to look at it and visibly see that it exists, and to bridge that gap. Paradoxically, by defunding the elements of government that try to at least partially address or suppress the contradictions of capitalism, by trying to more aggressively consolidate capital and power at the top, instead of dulling the class senses of people, eventually they will aggravate them. Because then it will be literally impossible to engage with society in a way that is not able to recognize, wow, there's just an entire another class of people up there that rules over us, and the people that we're being told to hate are in this same bottom class with us. You know? Does that make sense? In a way that, you know, these social programs helped to create the plausible deniability that such a class divide existed. Because there were the billionaires could come out and say, hey, well, your life isn't so bad, right? But the more they hollow out the economy, the more they hollow out the country, the more they strip away affordable housing programs and free school lunch programs and anything like that, the more impossible it gets to go out and be like, hey, your life's not so bad, because actually it is. And they deliberately did that to you, you know, specifically so they could have more money. And they already have so much money that they don't know what to do with it. Literally, like, the venture capitalists and stuff are sitting on so much money, they have no idea what to spend it on. And it is like such a problem that even economists whose job it is to do the accounting of the world have no fucking clue how much wealth is possessed by the ultra wealthy, you know? They're like having more money than you, like how much more power they have. Yeah. But ultimately that only translates up to a point. You know, you could even have like a private military defending you. And if you literally have all of the wealth and nobody else has any wealth, right? Like in this hypothetical environment where there's a very small class of oligarchs, which has almost completed their project of wealth consolidation and stuff like that. Even if you have guys with guns defending you, people are going to realize there are more of us than there are of you. And people don't tend to put up with that forever. You can see this throughout history, that revolutions happen at times of like historic inequality and like absolutely massive wealth disparity. That's why they invented bullets. Even an army with bullets wouldn't be able to prevent a revolution like that. Legitimately, the only thing that would be able to stop a revolution like that in its tracks, and even then only for a time, would be the threat of nuking the world. And none of the oligarchs want to nuke the world, because if they destroy the kingdom, then what is there to rule over? You know, eventually, you know, it's a question. There is a question of how bad things will get and how long it takes before we get to this point. But there's an inevitable point where these contradictions become unsuppressible, where these issues become so aggravated and aggravating that like people will throw themselves at the problem anyway. Not every bomb is a nuke. That's true, but even so, bombs won't be enough to stop it indefinitely either. You know? Again, it's that like the more they use violence to try to suppress the issue, the more people will be aware of the issue and that there is a distinct class trying to suppress it. You know? It's almost like there's kind of an uncanny valley territory where like things get bad before that like realization starts to happen, and we have to try to hasten the realization of like, oh shit, there's actually just a distinct class of people that fucking hates us in society. You know what I mean? You're saying people will become suicidal armies if things get that bad. Revolutions don't usually happen in the sense that like that kind of mass death where like the ruling class would be bombing and shooting en masse the people below them. That usually doesn't happen, at least not for very long. You know? Does that make sense? Like, it very rarely gets to that point. And hell, it's even pretty likely that revolutions occur peacefully, without shots really being fired. You know? Not in an appreciable sense, anyway. Seen rich people do everything in their power to stop you. This is where they will be hampered by their own stupidity. I know that there's like rich people are building doomsday bunkers and shit. It's like, again, I'm saying it's just a question of how, like, where do things go before this point, and what does it look like for us to start organizing with people to try to make things better and to try to address these issues maybe before they reach that critical burning point, you know? Because ultimately, while there is an eventual point beyond which things literally cannot get worse and a revolution is inevitable to happen, ideally our objective is to address as many of these issues as we can without anybody, like, getting hurt over it. Does that make sense? You know? But the wealthy love to try to make peaceful revolution impossible, which makes violent revolution inevitable. Oh, there's a thing here. Huh. How about that? I didn't know that you could do that. Are you saying we're like Thanos? That we are inevitable? Yes. The working class will all collectively stand up in a giant golem shape, and we will snap. And just like that, all the heads of all the billionaires and oligarchs will just kind of roll off. There won't even be any blood or anything. Their heads will just kind of roll off their body and just on the floor, and then that'll be it. It'll be done. That's the funny haha Thanos version. In the real version, is theoretically it's possible for you to have a socialist revolution, to have a to have a revolution where the property order is drastically altered without anybody getting killed. Like, that's possible. And it's happened as well. There have been times in history where that has happened. Look, Gotron, we know that people can be shit, and that we're also the best at conquering the planet. Thank you, skill issue, all the other animals. None of this requires people to not be shitty, you know? Our natural instincts toward each other are actually very cooperative. That's part of the reason that capitalism sucks so much. Because it forces everybody into a state of competition, you know? Not saying humans are bad. Okay, okay. But yeah, all that stems from the fact, basically, like, Republicans want to get rid of education. They want to get rid of housing, like affordable housing. They want to get rid of, you know, the pandemic infrastructure in this country. One of the things that will inevitably lead to disaster pretty quickly. They want to get rid of federal funding and funding for the arts, and for stuff that isn't, you know, I don't know, fucking investment and STEM or whatever enables them to concentrate wealth and shit like that. But they are digging their own grave by doing that, because they're trying to race away from the working class, all the while denying that them and the working class are distinct from each other. The working class is going to see that as they're racing away from them. You know what I mean? If rich people found a way, they would turn life into a gacha game? Yes. No lies detected. Have you ever heard of someone named Hunter Avalon? I have. I have indeed. Probably do one more race, and then that'll be it for this stream. But I want to talk about the good news as well. I'm sorry, I spent so much time talking about, like, the West is falling, billions must fucking subscribe to my YouTube channel specifically, thank you. But, like, there was some stuff that happened that I thought was interesting that I wanted to talk about. First of all, shout outs to, again, More Perfect Union. They're doing some great shit. Where's that post from them? More perfect union, where are you? Please. Please? No, did it seriously, like, did that get closed? What's going on? Oh, well. I saw a More Perfect Union post about Whole Foods. Apparently, workers in Philadelphia recently won a unionization battle with Amazon, which owns Whole Foods, of course. We know this. And so now Whole Foods in Philly is unionized. They're part of a sectoral food workers union, which I think is a giga-based. Glory to the workers, all of them giga-chads with jawlines, mogging their Virgin Corpo bosses and stuff like that. And this was in response to, apparently, the workers really felt like the tightening of worsening, like, conditions and benefits and whatever since Amazon took over Whole Foods, and they're not exactly just going to take that lying down. So it's good to see that, like, when people are at work, they know exactly what their interests are. They know bosses are not your friend. They know that, like, they have more bargaining power together, and the class consciousness that I'm referring to that, like, ultimately is going to bring people together to save society from ruin is present, it is developing, and we are going to see it. No matter what the Trump administration does to try to suppress the labor movement, I have a feeling that any success they see is not going to be super long-lived. Didn't Hunter Avallone have a redemption arc? I haven't watched anything of him for almost 10 years. If I remember, he was part of the anti-SJW community at one point. Then I heard he had a redemption arc. Yes, he did. He did indeed. He had a conversation with Vosh, and he was one of the only honest actors in the conservative space who had a willingness to engage in political conversation and have his mind changed. And lo and behold, he did. He became like a lefty liberal type of person. Who was very skeptical of far-right reactionism because, like, that shit destroys people's lives. And it's, not good for anybody. Except maybe the business class. Only met Hunter after his lefty turn, then I found Mr. V. Ah, nice. My first experience watching Vosh was actually in 2020 after the election, where he made a video about how to recognize propaganda. And so I started watching him more after that. That was my introduction to stuff. Before that, I had been watching some Hassan as well. Damn it, where is that post from More Perfect Union? I need to look for it. More Perfect Union. Show me the money. There it is. Yeah, here we go. Philadelphia workers won the first Whole Foods union under Amazon with UFCW. United, something. That's the Food Workers Union, I think. I don't know what the acronym stands for, not entirely. Fighting back against the multi-trillion-dollar giant and Jesus Christ. And hoping this win will be the first of many. Nice. The workers' unions, they're coming back. The hot labor summer never ends. I've seen people forming tenants unions as well. This is one of the things in my own life. I've been looking for affordable housing organizations that I could potentially volunteer with or work for in my area. Because, everybody's experiencing the housing crisis, and I feel like that's one of the biggest issues that should be focused on. And this is a big component of people banding together, workers banding together in the face of, like, oligarchs that are trying to, like, run away with the money, basically. We're through the looking glass now. Yeah. Yeah, it is, I think the resurgence of unions was kind of like a historical genie in bottle moment. where the business class and the right wing put a really, really large amount of effort into trying to contain and suppress the labor movement. But now that it's broken through again, I feel like they're not going to be able to put it back in the bottle. One of the anti-SJWs I used to watch in the late 2010s before I was left build ended up becoming a full-on flat earther. The loop of the right-wing logic. Yeah, a lot of those people have very anti-empiricist underlying logic that lends itself very well to conspiracy theories. So, you know, I've heard plenty of stories about, like, we're through the looking glass now. It was in reference to the multi-trillion-dollar thing. Oh, yeah. Okay. I got you. Yeah, that's fucking grim. Multi-trillion-dollar. An example right there of the ruling class just trying to take the money and run with it, you know? Multi-trillion. It was in an age of historic inequality. You didn't have so much as a multi-billion-dollar company. Like, companies back in the day were worth in the millions. Of course, you could adjust that for inflation. They'd probably be worth billions. But, like, multi-trillion-dollar company. You know? Welcome to the Gilded Age, folks. I'm back now. Welcome back. Just in time for stream to end, I'm afraid. I usually only want to go for 2 hours. I can actually feel the strain on my voice. Great. It's okay. We are raiding Azan. I remember like 5 years ago when General Oil or whatever it's called, the highest valued company ever at like 400 billion in 2019 money. Now look where we are. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The pandemic really was a catalyst for a lot of that upward wealth transfer, it seems. No, comrade, you need to stream for the creation of entertainment for the proletariat. I know, comrade. I'm doing what I can, but my voice can only take so much. Hassan's very iffy for me. I know that like a lot of people find some of his takes very disagreeable, and I do too. I don't agree with him on everything that he says, but Hassan is one of the few people that I consider to be more or less an honest actor in the left space. I know he has a lot of very problematic like pro-Russia and pro-China like viewpoints, and yeah, but ultimately I think that he's an honest actor and cares about, like, you know, at least it's not Vosh, I guess. True. Anyways. I don't know that many like people in the left space. But Hassan's one of the only people that I legitimately don't think is a grifter. Quite fond of Xanderhall? Ah. I don't think I want to expand too much on my thoughts on that guy, but that gets into drama. And I don't care for drama, like, ever. Lamau? Look. Watch Xanderhall until a server banned me for tankyism. Yeah, I remember. You told me about that. Anyways. Look. Regardless of our content creator preferences, the point is we're here to watch me play Mario Kart and talk about leftism and stuff. And if you don't want me to talk about like other content creators and stuff, I totally understand, and that is perfectly cool. So in the meantime, I will raid Hassan. There we go. I'll see you guys next time. As some guys said, the revolution will not be digital. That very well could be true. Yeah, I think. I'll see you guys next time. Try to look more into those affordable housing works while I'm away.